Benny Johnson here in Washington, D.C. on the campus of George Washington University. You might notice that the George Washington statue here is missing. Why is that? We're here in Washington, D.C. This says George Washington University. This statue was paid for by George Washington $1 bills, but you're not allowed to have it anymore. It was taken down. Why? Because the left is coming to cancel George Washington. We are here on George Washington University to find out if the people on campus here want to cancel George Washington and want to strip the name of this university from the history books. I can't wait to hear what they have to say. Let's go find out. People are trying to cancel George Washington. They want to change George Washington's name off stuff.
What kind of change are we talking about?
They're upset that he's owned slaves. And they said he owns slaves, so we got to get rid of George Washington. We got to cancel George Washington.
This is not funny. It's not funny.
Question is, do you agree with that? What do you think about that?
No, I disagree. I mean, this is an institution, not a slavery manufacturing institution.
That's a thing.
What about George Washington University? They're like, hey, cancel George Washington. People are like, cancel George Washington!
I feel like he did some good stuff too, though. Like, I don't know. I think it's too much. Like, I think it's also about like what he represents. So he represents, freedom, and he was, a strong character, and he didn't want the government to have too much power. He wanted things to be free and open, and I think if we look at it from that perspective, it's great. If you look at some of the other things that were going on in that time, slavery and treatment of women and different things, obviously it's like, okay, well, there's a lot of bad stuff in the culture back then, but there's bad stuff in every culture. I think we learn and we grow, and if we cancel everybody because of the time or place they were in or different mistakes they made, I think, we're going to cancel everybody.
My intentions were good.
Intentions are not good enough.
Oh, you went here?
I did, yeah.
Ah, okay.
A while ago.
So, does it hurt your feelings when people are like, cancel George Washington?
I have a lot of feelings about cancel culture.
It's complicated, so pay attention.
But when people are saying cancel George Washington, I think I'd want to hear where, where that's coming from.
History is so important just because, you have to know what happened in between times before you exist, or your parents exist, or any of your ancestors was alive, or anything like that. That's important for you to know down the line in history to keep you grounded.
That's correct.
It's not the name, it's the people. That's what I think. The people would make the difference.
Yeah, it seems to be a lot of people are focusing on one thing and acting as though people had to be perfect to have things named after them, which I think is a terrible. No one will have anything named after them then if you have to be a perfect person, but.
And so it's this concept of presentism, I suppose, where you take the ideals and morals of today and apply them to what was okay in the past, which is again really, really sticky territory, right? So we're not gonna go down there.
Don't even go down this road because I'm not talking about it.
Don't go outside the bracket and change this and change that. Change yourself. This name been there for a while. That's all it is a name.
I don't know. I feel like here in the States, we just sort of pick and choose which parts of our history we want to talk about, right?
No rush to judgment. No tear the whole place down. Yeah.
Tentatively.
Okay, did she seriously just say that?
What about George Washington University right up the road? They're coming for George Washington, They are.
That's another thing of his time. He was famous for many, many things. He could have been a dictator, but he wasn't. He did all kinds of good things.
And so with George Washington, I think that at the very least, instead of a rush to a decision, that there should be a conversation, a civil discussion. But I do think it's important to realize that there's just no black and white, right? There are shades of gray.
Yep. Great book, Shades of Gray. Thank you so much, and thank you for your book review. Well, you heard it from the people here, right on campus at George Washington University. Clearly a contentious and confusing issue. But the question for Americans is this: is America a mistake? Is this country imperfect and needs to be torn down because imperfect men made it? Or can you appreciate living in the freest, most prosperous, most generous, most incredible, most free and just country in the world, and recognize that you weren't perfect and neither were the people who started this country. This has been Benny Johnson. I'm just here to tell the stories. See you next week. Hey, it's Benny Johnson here, Turning Point USA's Chief Creative Officer. If you like this video you just watched, be sure to subscribe to the official Turning Point USA channel and never miss an episode. See you guys next week.